right. Hello, everybody. Mike Brock coming at you from beautiful Southern California um, to chat a little bit about. I'm gonna like kind of go against maybe, or at least apparently go against something I was talking about in recent days, and that's this conversation about Joe Biden. So I watched Sam Harris's interview with. Jake Tapper and his new book, which is coming out in a few days, that covers the Biden affair. Um, I mean, I'll share Sam Harris's characterization that I think the facts of the matter are inconvenient. I think that's like a good way of putting it. In no short order because of the fact that I mean, it does paint a picture of a man, right, in Joe Biden that put his ego and his own family's interests ahead of that of the country. Now, I already thought that of him, given how hard it was to push him out of the race in 2024. And I think he disappointed a lot of people in that regards. Uh, but to kind of come back to this idea of it being inconvenient. Not inconvenient because like we shouldn't accept the truth. Like we should absolutely accept the truth. I mean, if we're morally serious people, we have to embrace the truth, uh, and take it on. The real question is what is the salience of this, right, in our present moment. Our attention span as individually and collectively like is limited. Like I think we all feel this. Like we can't possibly keep track of all the things that are going on. Even among things that like I am very passionate about. I'm very passionate about the situation in Ukraine, for example. Like that's something that I've dedicated like a lot of my personal time to, right? Like trying to, find ways that I can assist the Ukrainians in their fight for freedom in Eastern Europe against the march of Vladimir Putin's forces. And on the other hand, too, I mean, like I'm intensely concerned about the geopolitical situation with China, right? Across the Pacific Ocean. Just as I look out here from the American West Coast towards the rising power that is Beijing, and America's soft power retreat that is giving China ample opportunities to be seen. Apparently now, like if you if you look at some of the global polling information, being seen as more of a stabilizing force in the world than the United States, like by the global South, and for like good reason. Like these are all incredibly concerning existential things for us to be thinking about. And then we have the conversation about like what really happened with Joe Biden and his cognitive decline. So holding these two things in our head, right? I mean, like, actually, we can't hold all these things in our head. That's the point. Like we have limited attention, and so like my position, my forceful position, is that like I don't actually care that much about the truth of Biden's cognitive decline. I'm willing to go so far as to say, I think all of the people that involved in this deception, particularly those close and inside of Joe Biden's circle, like we can write them off. Like fine, like let's not trust those people ever again, and move on quickly. I mean, the reality is like um, we're facing an existential threat, right, to the constitutional order that has been continuous for almost 250 years. We'll be celebrating the 250th anniversary of the United States. Very what was it, 2 years from now, right? Um, and and I'm forced. I mean, I'm forced to kind of confront this position that's going to kind of come off as like seeming like dismissive and not. and not being responsive to those people who want like a full accounting of the truth when I say that like I don't think this is an important thing to talk about right now. I think it's far more important to talk about the fact that the jet that the Qataris have given to Donald Trump that's worth somewhere in the order of $400 million is a direct violation of the Foreign Emoluments Clause in the Constitution. Like it's very clearly a violation of this. I mean, this idea, this construction, this legal construction that is being donated to his presidential library, and like somehow technically it's like not an emolument. Like this is like bullshit. Like he's receiving a gift, he's taking control of the gifts, he's getting enjoyment of the gift. Everything else is a legal fiction. I mean, like the idea that the founders would look at these technicalities and be like, "Oh, well, you got us there. There was a loophole." That's nonsense. That's nonsense. Um, you can play this game with like literally anything. If you're gonna play that game, I mean, the Constitution means what it means. Like you can't gift something to a president, and like I mean, and obviously there is a procedure for presidents like receiving gifts. Congress can approve it, or the president can just like donate it to the National Archives or something, but never actually take possession of it. And there's like a process for that. That's not what's happening here. Donald Trump is going to use this jet for his personal enjoyment. That is just like a complete violation of the emoluments clause, and anyone who says otherwise, I mean, I think is engaging in constitutional sophistry on behalf of tyranny. Like, like plain and simple. Like we have to like call this out. I mean, one of the problems that we have today, and this comes down to like the management of our attention in our daily life, is the recognition that some things are not that complicated. It's not that complicated. Like it's not like the 14th Amendment is not that complicated when it comes to birthright citizenship. Uh, like it's not complicated. Like if you're born in the United States, you're an American citizen. The end. There's no, like like anyone who thinks that like there's some sort of like legal construction, some like 17 pages of like legal theory that is somehow gonna like route you through some loophole through the back of the 14th Amendment and like actually like move us away from a system of jus soli, like which the United States has had for like well over a century, and affirmed by I think four Supreme Court decisions like over the last century, is full of shit. It's sophistry. And anyone who says that this is not an emolument is engaged in sophistry. There's no technical analysis here that's going to get you to a different position that is like honest and isn't just playing with like legal fictions. I think that's like very straightforward, and that's a crisis. The founders added the foreign emoluments clause to the Constitution because they were worried about um, foreign powers subjugating the will of the American people, and the proper responsibility that that those who assumed offices of um, public trust to the people of the United States, um, uh, would not like that their their motives would not be polluted by motives that do not converge on the interests of the United States. This is why we have the Foreign Emoluments Clause. The fact that I mean, there's a lot of I mean, it is the Qataris giving the gift, and we can talk about why that's concerning on like many levels. And I think even people on the right? I mean, they host the leaders of Hamas, right? Like if you're uh, if you're sufficient, if you're on the pro-Israeli side of this fence, you're probably very uncomfortable with that. I think even if you're on the other side of this, you'd be certainly concerned about like human rights abuses in Qatar, the corruption around like I mean the World Cup was like a massive like scandal, like unveiling sort of like a lot of like the dark undercurrents there in that country, and the interests that like converge there. Now, I mean, I'm not like look, I'm not even trying to take a position on uh the moral status of Qatar. You shouldn't have to. Even if this was a gift from Canada, it wouldn't be allowed. It's unconstitutional. I mean, the fact that there's like these like additional like concerns about like what actually could be the motive and like what favors could be being bought here is deeply, deeply concerning. Um, this happens like in parallel with the fact that like Donald Trump is going to allow the export of leading edge AI chips to the United Arab Emirates, which is a key ally of China, who we have export controls on because they're our primary adversary. And to think that the UAE is not just going to become a reshipping hub of our most advanced chips to China is like absolutely absurd. So like we're in this like massive crisis. Like I'm just like pulling these. I mean, like we can go on. Like I could probably like waste the next like 3 hours like picking thing after thing, which like actually points to a catastrophic geostrategic picture for the United States in the next like 5 to 10 years. That's like playing out like right in front of us. And so if we're going to say right now that like what the nation needs to do is to have some truth and reconciliation on what really happened with Joe and Hunter Biden. I mean, I have to ask the question, like, I mean, are we being serious right now? And this has nothing to do, quite frankly, with like what is true there, right? Like we can make the judge. I'm willing to make the snap judgment, right? That uh that 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 this does not look good, right? That people close to Joe Biden, right, like very carefully managed the public, tried to manage public perceptions about like the state of his cognitive decline. Like this much seems true. And like we can be mad about that, but like that doesn't like that's not like just positive on like on like what we should be focused on right now. Like it really isn't. Um, we haven't even brought up the fact, I brought this up last night and I'm going to keep bringing this up. I mean, the Cato Institute has identified at least 50 individuals who are in this CCOT prison in Venezuela that we put there that appear to have done nothing wrong. They appear to have followed our immigration laws, and by whatever abuses of process and lack of care and standards that this administration and its jackbooted lackeys and immigrations and customs enforcement carried out have put 50 innocent people into life sentences in a Central American gulag operated by a tin pot dictator. So I don't know how to like I don't know how to like meet somebody who thinks that like right now like we need to have like a national scandal on like what truly happened in the Biden administration. Uh I mean I mean I would probably like honestly like I would probably say that like regardless of the scandal that was uncovered in the previous administration, because we're in an acute immediate crisis that needs to be confronted. And we should talk about, I think, my piece today that I put out, um, that I think is like very relevant to this and relevant, I think, to like why people might intuitively think that this Biden story is of some moral and ethical equal weight to other things that are currently on our dinner table, as it were, in front of us. And that's the capacity, I think, of people to psychologically accept just how bad things are. Now, look, I mean, I actually think, for those who read me, I think I actually write in a quite an optimistic tone. And the truth is, I am quite optimistic about the human spirit, and I'm optimistic about what can be done. And I try to be really practical in what I tell people and what I sort of recommend to people, anyways, that they should do. I shouldn't say I tell people to do things. You don't have to listen to anything I say. Um, I'm not your boss. Uh, but I mean, like, to the extent that I give people advice, right? Like I tell people, right, like to focus, like, close close to home and focus on the small moral choices that we make throughout our day that builds sort of that character, that integrity, that courage that ultimately builds up to the civic courage that we need to um have a strong like liberal polity that can sustain the experiment of self-government that is the American project. So the issue that I think that I mean I see, and it's kind of crazy to I mean to say this, but I believe this. I mean, I would argue that even among those people for which I am preaching to the choir, where they agree with me on almost everything I say, are still actually, I think, in some degree of denial about how precarious our historical moment actually is. When you look at the totality of like what is actually going on, I think that like I mean the truth is that like people should be much angrier than they are, much more worried about the risks in front of them that they are. Uh, and I mean, and they should be far louder, like in all regards about um, the general like state of the world that they see in front of them. Because right now, what I perceive is this sense, this normalcy bias in many people. This sort of sense of like, well, we'll see what happens in the midterms. If the Democrats win in the midterms, that'll be good, right? Or if, if we win the presidency back in 2028. And I want to say that like I think like the common sort of mental frame that people have for the extreme downside risk is that there won't be any more elections, right? That we won't have midterm elections, that they'll be completely rigged, or the 2028 election will be completely rigged against any oppositional candidate to Trump, or assuming he tries to run for a third term, or some other designated member of that movement, maybe Don Jr. I don't know. Um, the truth is that like the what is happening right now um, is so beyond the pale of anything that we have seen like since I mean essentially the Civil War period. And that's like an exceptional statement to say because I'm still sitting here in this relatively peaceful backyard in Los Angeles in beautiful Southern California, and I'm saying this. There's certainly no bombs going off around me, but what I mean by that is that like we for the first time in American history um have a government of I mean we don't have like we don't have in many cases competent executives trying to run government bureaucracies. We have saboteurs and political operatives that are searching for dissent and are trying to install political loyalists, are trying to weaponize systems of government against political opposition. We've never seen anything like this before. Like, conservatives may scream about that. That's exactly what happened under the Biden administration with Trump. But, like they'll make all these arguments about like what happened in the New York case and how they used like a novel theory to like indict him, but, like, I mean, it's like, even if you, like, granted them that, like, what we're seeing here is just, like, the wanton destruction, of American federal institutions, and this is causing damage. This is damage that will take generations to repair. I mean, even assuming everything went completely right, right, in the next two elections, and there was some like broad coalition, like let's say like I don't know, like AOC becomes president in 2029, and I don't know, maybe she sweeps the power in some like massive like you know. I don't know, maybe 60% of Americans vote for her in some massive landslide, because of like how angry everyone is at how much damage Trump has done to the country. I think the thing that you have to kind of understand in that situation is that she will be presiding over over a federal government that has been like destroyed, that its capacity to uh, you know, uh, enact policy, to regulate, um, to actually like do the mission that it's like supposed to do, like by statute, will have been so badly diminished. It will have been drained of competent, like civil servants. Like she's going to be presiding over a mess, and so like things might continue to get worse for a very long time as like systems continue to break down and corruption runs rampant. And then what do you think's happening, right? In like in the midterms and like, in 2030, right? Oh, like, because like, AOC is like presume is presiding over this like steaming pile of trash that these like motherfuckers have like left for her, which is what it's going to look like at the rate that things are going. Voters are going to get mad at her for like not doing enough, and then the right wing is going to have another like way to sort of like they're going to take control of Congress again, and they're going to frustrate like if people think this ends just by like by the election being won in 2028, like I think people have another thing coming. People don't realize that the damage that's been done right now is is it's beyond what people can even imagine because I haven't felt the damage yet. Um, and so I do not project a return to normalcy in the U.S. politics inside of 10 years. It's likely to keep getting worse and worse and worse for at least like the next 5 to 6 years. Um, just based on the sort of the structural like trends alone. uh Add to that the fact that um you know much of the population is checked out, doesn't like have any faith in politics to begin with, and couldn't bother to sit through what I'm telling you right now. And so I mean, it's just like trying to find like the united political will to sort of put this country back on track. I mean, I don't know. Like, I mean, historically, the only thing that tends to do that is a war. Um, and that's the other scary thing because, like, I think there's an elevated chance of war with China in the next 10 years. I think it's significant. I've written about this. Um, it's not even that hard to like imagine scenarios upon which it could happen, as I've talked about before. So I think from the perspective of like how bad can this get? Well, I mean, it can get pretty bad. Um, Now, I mean, like I don't think we should despair. But I do think that we should also look towards the future with the knowledge of knowing that like there is a struggle ahead. But it's a meaningful struggle. It's a worthwhile struggle. I think human freedom is worth fighting for. I do in my heart of hearts. I believe that um, that it is our obligation to fight this fight. Um, I I'm pretty strident in the fact that I won't leave the United States. Like I know I have friends that are planning on leaving the United States because they're scared and like and what have you. And look, I don't know. I don't want to throw around the coward word like too like um uh flippantly. People have their own situations and they have things to worry about. But I mean, like there was a clip video that I saw a few years ago. Um when the in the first in the opening weeks of the Ukraine Russia conflict. I think there was like a European like film crew that had set up at the border crossing between Poland and Ukraine, and there was like volunteers, like you probably heard about this, right? The volunteers into the Ukrainian Foreign Legion, and there was like a young Canadian man that was like, I believe he was former Canadian military, and he was walking across the border, and the reporter like stopped him and asked him, "I was like, where are you from?" He's like, "I'm from Canada." I was like, "I'm former Canadian Armed Forces." And she asks him like, "Why are you doing this? Like, why are you going to fight someone else's war?" And the young man responds and says like, "Wars are won by people who show up." And then he kind of just kept walking across the border. I thought that was that was a very memorable that was a very memorable moment for me. And I think, like very like philosophically resonant with me, right? Um, at the end of the day, like if the elements of civil society that have the capacity to fight back are relocating to Europe or Canada, other parts of the world, we are making the fascist job easier. Um, and I do think that like this idea that Europe or Canada or the other countries are safe havens in this moment is also a illusion, in my opinion. The social forces that are driving the emergence or the reemergence and the flourishing of fascist politics in the West, um, are, I mean, they're socially contingent. They're not just like a function of like the fact that Donald Trump is president or that Donald Trump is on the scene. Um, I mean, even though, say, looking north of the border, like at Canada, Mark Carney won the election, but he didn't win it by that much, right? Like the hard right in Canada, while not strong enough to form government right now, is a much stronger force today than it was 10 years ago. And the same is true in Europe. Um, and we see like what's happening in Europe right now. I mean, like the France and Germany are sort of taking the risk right now of like trying to just fully disenfranchise these right wing parties by like you know charging their leaders and banning their parties from running, which I mean did in fact happen, right? In the Weimar Republic, right? The Nazi Party was initially banned and Adolf Hitler was jailed, um, and that didn't stop it ultimately. And so I think there's this sense right now, particularly outside the United States, that the backlash to Trump has been the thing that's broken the right wing populist spell, and this is something that like people need to be like really disabused of. This has not happened. The spell has not been broken. Institutional trust among Europeans and the European Union and the European Commission and Brussels has not like improved. Um, it's also the case too that like the a lot of the far right figures in say Europe and Canada may not like Trump that much. Like there's no rule that like far right people have to like each other. Like far right people don't always like each other, right? Like I mean they turn on each other. They're bad people. They're gangsters. Um and most gangsters generally want to like rule all the other gangsters if they can. So the way in which like two liberal democracies are friends is a lot different than the way that like two fascist dictatorships are friends, right? Like the Italian fascists and German fascists were allies, but in many ways like the Italian fascists were especially like, near the end, we're sort of completely dominated by the Nazis, and somewhat like, uncomfortable with the amount of like domination and control, right, that the Nazis had over them, like, forcing them to like align like racial laws and stuff like that they didn't want to do. So I mean like this idea that like the idea that like fascist regimes can be thought of in the same sort of like cooperative light that liberal regimes across borders can, is like just also like sort of an error in thinking about these things. So I mean that's like a long way of saying that like I don't think that like Trump fucking up as bad as he is, that Trump starting this trade war, that Trump causing the supply shock that we're going to start feeling in the next 1 to 2 weeks in the United States in a more serious way through like retail channels. Um, it means that like the fever has been broken. The fever has not been broken. We have not seen peak fascism in the West. Um, if I was a betting man, like I think we're gonna probably see like, I don't know, like a handful of Russia of European states over the next 7 to 10 years, potentially like go down, like go the way of Hungary. Like I think that could very well happen. I mean, look what happened in Austria. I mean, I mean, the fascists like basically won the election, and they basically threw the election out. Like, I mean, I don't know that's how you ultimately like contain that sort of damage. Especially, now you have like probably a huge segment of like Austrian fascists who are like, look what happens. We win the election. They don't respect the results. Well, that's it's kind of true. That is kind of what happened, isn't it? Um, you might say to yourself, well, I mean, like fascism, like we maybe we can't accept it, but I mean, like these people don't go away. I mean, they don't stop feeling disenfranchised. They don't stop feeling angry. So, so when I say that, like I think people just don't like fully accept how bad this situation is. I think those are the proportions of it. The world is not going to snap back to the world of the 90s and early 2000s. That world is dead. It's gone. It's not coming back. Um, and we are in a scary jungle right now of competing power interests, and we're doing that at a time when our technological and scientific capacities are growing. I mean, in ways that produce existential threats. Like, I mean, AI. Like, we don't know what the potential risk of AI robots running around is to humanity. I think there's a lot of reason for us to worry that's a problem. We need to think about that. But I think even more scary. I think most people who worry about AI should probably be more immediately worried around like advances in synthetic biology, right? Gene manipulation. Like, I mean, like we're reaching a point where like eugenics is going to become a problem. I mean, there's people who say that China's already practicing eugenics. And and then and even beyond that, like the ability and the capacity that we have with, now that we've like solved things like protein folding, the protein folding problem, right? The Google's AlphaFold, which is like, probably like maybe the most important scientific breakthrough of the last 10 years, like that not many people know about. But I mean, like that has unleashed, a world of possibility, from like us being able to cure cancer, right? Maybe in the next 10 years. But it also means that like we have the we've created the potential to create biological super weapons, that nothing can stop, right? There's also this like issue of negative life, like, that, where you create like DNA that has different protein cardinality, and like in theory, if you did that, if you were to create like, like a particularly infectious bacteria that was constructed with the opposite cardinality that we see in all life on Earth today, that no biological immune system would be able to contend with it. And so, like, that's like a potential. like doomsday weapon right there. And that's we probably have the ability to do that today. That's probably within our technological capability. And so our world is politically falling apart at a time where we're building technologies that literally could represent the end of all life on Earth, if not properly regulated and controlled. And we don't have a government in the United States, especially that seems particularly concerned with like any of that. In fact, we have the opposite. We have uh, people like Mark Andreessen and these like effective accelerationists who think the answer is just to let the private sector go hog wild and play with these technologies without any kind of oversight or restriction. I'm sorry, but that's just like absolutely like fucked. Like, I don't care, like, I'm actually, like, a pretty, like, I mean, I'm not a I mean, I'm a liberal, I'm not a socialist, so I'm like, I think we should have, like, reasonable regulation that doesn't, like, stand in the way of innovation and growth, but, like, holy shit, like, a technology like this that can, like, wipe out humanity, like, that's a pretty good justification. It's a thing that kind of that kind of potential uncaptured externality through economic activity of that kind of sort seems like the kind of thing that uh, the government representing the people has some sort of equitable interest in intervening in and around the safety and dispensation of that kind of technology. So, um, but we don't seem to have any capacity to take that on, and that's scary. That's I think that is something that most people are not thinking about, that really bothers me, and I don't wanna freak people out, but I mean, like, this is not happening at a good time for us. Uh, I mean, we've performed this, like, giant scientific experiment on the human psyche, over the past 10 years in the form of social media. It has been a failure. It has been a mental health disaster for young kids, particularly young girls. Um, there's been no accountability for it, like no proper regulation. These algorithms are now like effectively controlling what people believe. There's no transparency there. Um, and these technologies have helped amplify and lean into uh, the underlying trends that have led us here, and they profit off of this. They profit off of anger. They profit off engagement. We all know this. These economic incentives are bad. They lead us to like a bad place. And once again, we have no capacity as a society to actually talk about this in like a constructive way. And if you're a parent, like you know how true this is. Um, so so I think that I don't know. I mean, there's a general lack of seriousness, I think, um, among people, in terms of like really contextualizing this. Like civilization is serious. This is a serious game that we're playing. We've built a precarious civilization. Like we depend on electricity and running water and medicine. Think of all the things in your life that you depend on. Um, and and all of the systems and processes that go into supporting that. I'm here in Los Angeles. It should be noted that like LA doesn't have enough water to survive naturally. We pump massive amounts of water from Northern California through the Central Valley California Water Project, all the way down to Southern California in order to, have running water here in LA. Um, if we got into a world war and China were to bomb that canal in the Central Valley, you would have tens of millions of people in Southern California without any water in a matter of weeks. And so you think about like all of those like little like precarious touch points in our society that we don't think about, that we take for granted. Um, and so like and so like being in a situation where we don't have a serious government that's taking these threats seriously, that's instead spending all of its time chasing political opponents, uh that you have an FBI now that's investigating people for posting 8647 to social media instead of chasing down like potential terrorist threats. I mean like Timothy Snyder would suggest here that like maybe like they're hoping actually that there's a terrorist attack, and that they want to take their eye off. I don't know if that's actually what Timothy has like said, but he suggested that this may in fact may happen, and when that does happen, the fascists are going to try and take advantage of that. They're going to say, "Oh, look at this terrorist attack that happened. Obviously, we have to suspend the Constitution to like to find all these people." And that's like that's something that I think that people need to be on guard for. That could happen any day. Um, and one has to worry that like when you have these incompetent fucking people that have no idea what they're doing. I mean, Christy Nome, the head of, she is like she's like talking about doing a reality show in which like like illegal immigrants like try to like earn their citizenship or something by like doing these like trials and tribulations on a real, like this is insane. Like this is like sadistic evil shit, and like that's what they're spending time on, like rather than like the important work of like keeping our country safe from like people who want to do us harm. Like uh you just like wonder like what's going to happen, like who's going to get through now that wouldn't have otherwise gotten through, and then they're going to try and cynically capitalize on that, find the way to like blame the left for it, and then use that as like a pretense for like arresting political commentators. And like this is like I think like real things that may in fact happen in the coming months and years. um and the degree to which that people aren't like taking this as seriously as they should is a bit like disturbing. I did mention that you know I listened to the interview with Sam Harris and Jake Tapper on his book about Biden at the top of this. And that was like, I mean, I think that the thing that I found unsettling about that exchange between Sam and Jake wasn't that like I heard anything unreasonable said. Although I do think that that Sam sort of, I think, did sort of, to his credit, try to make some, points of order on the sort of like relative moral weight of the things that are before us. But there is a sort of like disorienting element. And by the way, like I'm not gonna like attack Jake Tapper. Like I do think that he's like a really professional, like truth telling journalist. Um, but I also find it a bit disorienting that he talks about Biden in the same register that he talks about Trump receiving a $400 million Qatari jet emolument, um, from a foreign monarch. There's just something about that that just seems like, and I'm not saying he's doing anything like wrong. I mean, like I get it. Like he's a professional journalist, but it's disturbing in some level, at some level, um, that these things are sort of like held beside each other, like they're like just like on some equal plane. Uh, and and Jake might take issue with that. And to be clear, I'm not even saying that that's like the position that he's taking, but it's like it's almost the impression one would get, right? Just from sort of the neutral, like the sort of the consistence of register. And I'm sure he would sort of defend himself by saying that like that's what a good journalist does, is they maintain that same neutral register no matter what they're talking about. But for someone like me, right, I'm not a professional journalist. I'm actually like, I'm very like like forward, right? And in the moral lens in which I look at these things. And I mean, I'm angry. I'm angry that my country is like quite literally being stolen from me. I'm angry that patriotic language is being used by people who hate the values of this country. um, I am like beyond pissed off that this compliant Congress is doing absolutely nothing about this. I am besides myself with the moral travesty that is the renditioning of innocent people to a foreign detention camp with a lifetime sentence, and the sort of like emotional neutrality that you see in a conversation like that, I don't know, it just seems like robotic and at some level, like, not human to me. So that's my, like, take on that. I mean, like, and I know that a lot of people will think that that's an unfair take because of of, like, especially if you're, like, a professional journal and I've had professional journalists, I've talked to them if, like, um and they have heard me say this, and they do put their back up against the wall when I say this, and I get it. They're not opinion columnists, but, like but for fuck's sake, like, our country is, like, I mean, it's been turned into an unserious circus, ultimately. So, like, that's, like, my key thoughts about that. Um, I guess if, like, as of yesterday, like, I'm happy to maybe take some comments slash questions in my last like 15 or so minutes if people want to so uh entertain me with their questions. I'm happy to chat. Someone might have already said something that I can respond to if I scroll back through this. Oh, one thing I want to bring up actually, like while people are thinking about potential questions that they want to ask, is this stance on how much we should pay politicians. I have like long taken the view that we should pay members of Congress like a lot more money than we currently do. And this is like always met with opposition on both like the right and the left for different reasons. Um, because of like this like kind of sense of like I don't know, the sense of like unfairness or whatever, but we don't pay like we like honestly like congressional salaries are like nothing now, like, right? Like, Washington DC is like a very expensive place to live. Like $115,000 salary or something like that is like in a city like DC is like literally nothing. Um, and I mean, in AOC, like AOC has like made like Instagram live videos about this over the years, like really like putting in perspective like how not far that amount of money goes if you're not already rich when you go to Washington. Um, and that's like a problem. Like that's a problem, right? Uh, it encourages politicians to live off of donors. And then those donors and there's strings attached to those donations. And so by creating this situation where politicians can only survive in DC on the back of donors, you create this incentive structure that that like allows donors to manipulate our politicians and causes our politicians to spend all their time fundraising. So if you really wanted like good people that just wanted to be good civil servants and make good policy, like you need to pay them enough money to live in Washington D.C. and we don't do that. And I don't under and I don't understand why like Americans like get up in arms at the idea that we would like raise their salaries. Like we absolutely should fucking do that. Like are you fucking kidding me? Like I mean like even if you like I also know like a lot of people that like that want to run for office. They're, they might be like, say, really smart people, maybe upper middle class people. I met them in my life. They've done the math and they're worried that they'll be able to take care of their family, right? Unless they like go and like do dirty things in Washington, like over a period of years, right? Because maybe they make good money. Maybe they make you know, $250,000 a year, but they live in like, the Bay Area. And so like making $250,000 a year in the Bay Area is like, you know, it's like making like $100,000 a year in like, most of the rest of the country. And so they look at that and they're just like, well, I mean, like I mean, I can't. This is terrible. And so those kinds of people just don't run for office, because it just looks financially unappealing. And so what do you get? You get these like celebrity fucking influencer types that make money off of their like social media forays and like engagement politics. And you get clowns. We get clowns. So yeah, like I totally think, yeah, like just like who gives a shit? Like give members of Congress like $450,000 a year and senators $600,000 a year and just like be fucking done with it. I think we would be surprised at the increase in quality of the politicians that we would get. Um like that's like my opinion. I don't and if you disagree with me, you're wrong. Sorry. Um so does anyone have any like questions or comments? Let me see here. Yeah, yes, we used to be a serious country before Donald Trump came along. Next question. Is there any way to get him out of office using the law? What can we do to help at this time with not being a politician? Well, I mean, you need to make members of Congress more afraid of you than they're afraid of Donald Trump. They're very afraid of Donald Trump. Um, and by fear, I don't mean like threatening them. I mean like make them afraid that they're going to lose like power. Um, uh, because that's what they're afraid of. They're afraid of losing power. So like the incentives on Congress have to change like significantly, to the point where they're far more afraid of public backlash than they are of Trump basically like bleeding or tweeting about them. Because right now they're just like especially the Republicans. I mean, even the Democrats. I mean, the Democratic Party is like pretty fucking useless right now. If you ask me, like I'm like very disappointed. I'm like not currently like donating to like any Democratic candidate right now. Even though I've done so in the past, because I'm just like I don't see the party like operating seriously at all on any of this. They seem completely lost and listless. They don't know what to do. Uh, they were used to sort of their focus groups and consultants that created their talking points for them. And they have no capacity to think on their feet. Uh, I mean, it's not good. Um, I'm hoping I'm hoping that some kind of you know sane populist sort of like movement materializes in the next 12 months and sweeps a whole new breed of politicians into Congress or something, that sweeps these like motherfuckers away, because I there's like no fight in these people, and that's terrifying in a moment like this. We need a vigorous and energetic opposition, and we do not have that. They seem moribund and tired and confused, um, and simply like and afraid of their own shadows. Like, I mean, the common wisdom among these guys, and I've spoken to a few of them, and if they see me like right now, they're probably like, upset at me for my characterizations here, but I won't name names. Uh, is that like they think that the lesson that they learned from the 2024 election was that voters don't want to hear about democracy. They want to hear about kitchen table issues. And this is what they talk. And so um this is like such a misunderstanding of politics. It's like insane. It's insane. Um like the idea that you try to like figure out what people care about and then construct a political program around that is a very, very like strange way of thinking about politics, because the truth is most people aren't informed, who don't have time to fully understand the intricacies of tax policy, don't have the time to understand the intricacies of health policy. um when Obama like pushed for the Affordable Care Act, I don't think that like they were like, I don't think they were like holding their finger up in the air and like asking themselves like what people wanted. It's like no, he like decided that this is what he was going to fight for, and he got people to believe in it and people to come behind it. Like you can do that with things. Like you can be a politician. Like people didn't know that they wanted to go to the moon until JFK said it, right? At that, and then the "We choose to go to the moon" speech, right? Like politicians can whip up support for things if they like stand for something. So this like consultant and focus group mentality of the Democratic Party is like it's nuts. It's nuts. It's the most like self-defeating uh like Washington DC beltway nonsense that I've ever seen. Um so from my perspective is like there's plenty more that they could be doing. So what else we got going on here? Trump and what's one of the In my state, the Dems just approved a huge tax increase in the middle class after spending our surplus into a deficit. But I mean, okay, super unpopular opinion. Like, we need to raise taxes in this country and cut spending. We have to do both of these things. I hope people know that this is actually going to happen at some point, whether people like it or not. Um, there will like there'll need to be increases in middle class taxes, um, and there should also be like massive increases on the people like me, quite frankly. I'm like, I'm relatively wealthy. There should be tax increases on people like me. Um and uh and that's just like a function of math. Like this country, we're going to have like the dollar is going to collapse at some point. If we don't deal with the fiscal issues. And the situation is actually getting like pretty acutely bad right now. In fact, the markets are down today. I think like the Dow was like down like 800 points, like related to like concerns over this. Um, like I mean, like if people like actually like expect things like Medicaid and Social Security to keep functioning, we're going to have to raise taxes. And raising taxes on billionaires isn't going to be enough. It's just not going to be enough, right? Um, like contrary to like what people think, right? Because most billionaire wealth is paper wealth, like tied up in stocks and stuff like that, right? Like you can really only efficiently tax like cash flow and income. And we can tax more of that, right? Among rich people, you could tax a lot more of that. That's true, and you can bring in like quite a bit of money. But like yeah, like I mean, like a 2 or 3% like tax hike on the middle class is like going to be like fucking necessary. Anybody who's being honest about this, um, uh like realizes this. I mean, Margaret Thatcher in the 1980s had to raise taxes on the middle class, and she was like a neoliberal because of the fiscal account situation in the UK. Like, right wingers in Canada, the Mulrooney government in the early 90s had to raise taxes too, right? Because like Canada was like fiscal situation was in such bad shape. Like at some point, like, you don't have a choice. You have to raise that revenue, or like you're going to face like fiscal collapse, and that would mean collapse of the entire economy. It would mean collapse of the banking system. It would mean, you could have like 10,000% inflation or something like that in a year. It would be 40, 50% unemployment. Like this idea that like we like that 2 or 3% tax cut on the middle class in the United States is something that can never happen no matter what. Well, I mean, like, if you take that position, then like you have a complete failure of imagination of just how bad it will get if we actually have like a proper default. And I mean that's hard. That's like hard to hear, right? Like that all of us are going to have to like basically make do with less. But that's our fault. That's our fault for voting in politicians that haven't taken seriously the fiscal situation that we now find ourselves in. And Trump has made that situation far, far worse with this trade war, by um, basically damaging the foreign exchange premium that we have on the dollar as the world reserve currency, and has now like created this like global distrust in the safety of treasury debt, on top of like solvents, on top of like sovereign debt like concerns, and the serviceability of that debt in like the coming years. um, so yeah, I mean, taxes are gonna have to rise in this country. Uh, and and if we don't do that, in the coming years, like we're in serious trouble. But that's not what's happening. The the Republicans are trying to push through a $10 trillion tax cut, with no spending reduction. Um, I can't believe like if that happens, like I mean, something tells me like that the treasury market is not going to be happy, but these sons of bitches seem to be hell bent on testing fate. And so anyways, that's all I have time for today. That's like my hour. I'll be back tomorrow with more of my thoughts. And thanks everybody for showing up this afternoon or this evening, wherever you are.